Now, I mentioned Carlos, which triggered me. That I remember that you used to work with him at one time, did some
I
things.
opened for him.
You
I
opened
opened
for him.
for him for
All
like
right.
2 years.
And that did not end well, correctly?
No, I
Oh,
actually
it
left
did.
him in 2008. I was on a national tour with him. I started working with him in 2005. I Working with him broke me down. Every year would kind of break me down. And in 2008, we had an incident in Atlanta, Georgia, where there was an incident with like the group of guys from the tour and a female server at a restaurant, and I didn't like how they were talking to her, and I didn't like what they were trying. Just didn't like that interaction at all, and I said something, and there was this thing in my mind where I'm like,
Oh, don't bite the hand that feeds you.
well, and then I'm like, is this how you're gonna go out? Because I had already in my mind I knew I had to leave.
Right.
How do you leave if you don't have another job?
Well, he has a reputation for not being a pleasant person, joke thief, etc.
So yeah, so it was like it was this thing where I left, I kind of bit the bullet and I made a big scene and I told them that they couldn't talk to that female server like that, and I told them to leave her alone. And I remember it was like we had already closed, so like they had already closed the restaurant. We had been at the bar. We closed the place down. They all thought I was drunk because it's like, why am I making the scene? And for me, I'm like, oh no, like you guys are
so no, this is real. This
yeah,
is happening right now.
No, you guys are dicks. Like, let me tell you why you're dicks.
Let me spell it out. If you didn't remember what you just said 2 minutes ago.
So then, I remember having that moment where I'm like, well, fuck it. This is the thing. This is how I'm leaving. So I went down the road and I told everybody off and told them how I felt. And we were already going on the bus to the airport to fly home. That was in 2008. I flew home. He was doing a show at the Gibson Amphitheater, which used to be a big venue here, but that closed years ago. He called me and asked me to open for him. I went. It was so awkward because apparently that's when that's when I found out that people thought I had just gone on a drunken phase or whatever.
She's lost her marbles.
And that was the last day I ever spoke to him, and that was in 2000. Wow. And the comics that I toured, there was a comic I traveled with that I couldn't stand because he was adopting the habits of Mencia, and people like the guy.
Was this all before Joe Rogan outed him with that big video about his?
It was right after. It was like okay. It was during that time. So
hindsight, was that kind of resting on you a bit as well? Like this is toxic environment with him and bad PR. Maybe it's.
Oh no, no. For me, here's the thing about that. During that time, you have to understand. Like I try to explain to people, we had MySpace then. We don't have the internet that we had now. When I first met him, when I first met him and he asked me to go on the road, I didn't respond to his material. He just wasn't my style. But all the comics were like, this is a big opportunity, blah, blah, blah. We never knew that he had a reputation of being a thief because back then, stand-up was different. Like back in those days, we didn't have the internet that we had now. So like back in those days, you could actually sell out shows doing morning radio shows. You know what I mean? There wasn't this like, Facebook, every interaction that there is now. So as Dallas comics, we were getting info that we could get in Dallas back then. So it wasn't until later on that working with him, that I realized that that's what people thought of him. So it was kind of like this, once I started learning, my interaction with him actually ended because I had problems with how I was being treated really shitty by being the only woman on the tour.
Adding another woman wouldn't have helped.
Then we would have just had a mud fight every night. He would have demanded it.
Right. Hello, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel by clicking right there, and we'll send you a free gift. There's no free gifts. Sorry.